Thanks, Arlen. Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Ann Reynolds. I have approximately 35 years of public school education. Um, I do uh, present for institutes if any of your schools are interested, and you can take a look at my website here on the first page if you would like in your spare time. Um, these are some of my uh, things I've received during my teaching career, but please understand that at about 1992, I came very close to leaving the teaching profession. I almost went back to Chrysler in Belvedere as a foreman because I had worked there for 10 years, um, on and off while I put myself through school and started teaching. I would work there in the summers, but I did consider leaving in my seventh year. But that can happen if you aren't in an environment where you can flourish. So, try and find that environment that you can flourish in, and then create an environment that students enjoy to be in. And then it's like not working. Um, I had to move about 2 blocks from where I was teaching, and I ended up at a high school and eventually ended up in the health high school classroom, which is where I belonged. And then everybody flourished. Um, the main point I want to make today is kids crave connection. There is no doubt about it. Whether it's jokes, a friend of mine that teaches math, she always has music playing as kids come in the classroom. In any way that you can, make it inviting, make it non-judgmental, as fair as possible, and it needs to be a place where students feel comfortable, um, and to be an adult that kids can trust. There's a variety of ways to do that, a lot of which I covered in classroom management number one. I'm going to review just a couple things to do because if you don't have some cornerstones to your classroom, you just can't build that foundation. So, um, I did find that when I think I was doing my best work, um, our our school happened to be very, very crowded, and the lunchrooms during lunchtime were insanely crowded. And kids would ask, "Could I just come and sit in your classroom and eat my lunch? I'll sit on the floor. I'll be against the wall." It's just so crowded in the lunchroom that um, there aren't even any tables. And so I said yes. And it ended up I would have 17 kids along the walls of my classroom just because it was a more comfortable environment. They picked up everything that, there was no scraps left. They didn't interrupt what was going on. I was absolutely amazed. After that, a referendum was passed and we were able to add on to the lunchroom and it kind of dissipated. But I remember being really struck by the fact that I had almost another half a class of kids perfectly behaved just because they wanted to be able to sit somewhere in peace. And kids are actually pretty fair-minded most of the time. And if you can meet some basic needs of theirs, they will fight for you. They will defend you. It's interesting to watch that happen. Um, so to begin with, start building a syllabus and your policies. I used extra credit a lot because life happens and parents are in the middle of a divorce and kids can drop some assignments and they can't. In my class, they couldn't do extra credit unless their actual assignments were in. I didn't care how late they were, but I wasn't going to have a kid do a truckload of extra credit and then pass the class at the end of the semester. So make sure you have classroom guidelines, late policy, bathroom passes, rewards, whatever. Try and cover every single little gap that you can. I found that I had to make I did a whole adjustment at one point when I realized that what I was doing wasn't really reaching kids. And then I redesigned everything. And then from that, I would just have to tweak it a little bit every semester or every year. And then after a while, the class kind of runs itself. Now, sometimes you do have high maintenance classes, you do have high maintenance students, um, but it takes about 2 weeks to train students. It's a little bit like, if you've ever had to train a puppy, it's similar to that. And in education, I don't think it really matters. I mean, you do have more bathroom issues at elementary school, but whether it's elementary or middle or high school, um, kids are pretty fair-minded, and I've worked at all levels. Um, and if they trust you, then and if you create it so that um, they don't want to tip over the apple cart, then you can actually make progress. You can dangle the carrot and offer them rewards for good behavior. And if two students are feuding, and that, and it's been a long time battle, I would always place them at the furthest corners of the room, and I would know not to put them in groups. Just little things like that. If you have a difficult classroom, it may take a little bit more time, and it will also take greater consistency. And sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. I remember way back in the beginning of my career, I worked at a middle school, and it was an odd age group. It was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in that one building. Actually, it was part of the district's 7th and 8th graders and all of the district's 9th graders in one building. And in that particular building, they threw up a bar graph at the beginning of the school year one year, and they said, okay, this is the average, grade range for the 9th graders. And it was, in the 80th percentiles. And then they showed the average percentiles for the 7th graders, and it was in the lower 80s. And then they showed the percentiles for the 8th graders. And for some reason, it was like upper 60s, low 70s. It was really a significant drop. And we were all like, whoa, what was in the water that year? Well, you're going to have that across the years of teaching. You're going to have challenging classes, or if, excuse me, a school decides that they have to use what they used to call arena scheduling, where you have the same group of kids go from, in middle school, for example, go from social studies to math to English. And after a while, they would, as my coworker said, take on the characteristics of a gang. It was like, oh my goodness. So hopefully no one's doing arena scheduling anymore, but you just never know. And sometimes you can get, groups of students that have a negative impact on the whole. Try and punch holes in that in whatever way you can. If you go back and look at Classroom Management 1, I was able to do that with a very difficult and challenging negative leader that I had in class. And in his particular case, what I did was I wrote good news postcards for all of his group, unbeknownst to him, and gave them to them one at a time secretly. And all of a sudden they peeled off of him because they had never received anything positive from anybody sent home to their parents. So just find whatever works. With your syllabus, assignment sheet, extra credit, make the math simple. Students should be able to easily figure out their grade. Parents should be able to figure it out. If it's addition and division, it should be at about 5th grade level so that anybody can figure it out. We had an electronic website, and you could weigh different assignments, and you could make this half that, and to me, that just becomes so complicated that as a student, I would just give up trying to figure out my own grade, and then they can't figure out how to improve it if they have no idea what their grade is. So if it's simple and everything's above board, then they kind of know where they're at. If they're okay with a C, I'm okay with the C. In my class, they should have been able to get an A or a B or whatever they wanted. But if all they wanted to do was pass, I mean, school isn't everybody's cup of tea, so it's fine. You might be able to have as many different types of presentations of your class as possible. Try and have a digital copy of your classroom. In other words, like a free website. There's numerous ones that are available. Try and have hard copies of things. I've even passed out hard copies of students with a duplicate copy for their parents or their guardian. And I would also have a hard copy of everything they needed for my class taped to the wall. Not all the assignments, but the syllabus, the assignment sheet, and the extra credit. I would have all those. They would have to actually literally walk by them because I had them taped to the wall near the doorway. So they passed them twice a day, and they also had their own copies. Now, as an example, on my syllabus, I had the website, I had the materials that they needed, I had the units that they would cover, different things that we would do in class. We would do kind of some lab experience sometimes, and they would get different grades on that. In my class, students were responsible for turning their work in on time. If it was not in the classroom at the beginning of the hour, I considered it late. It didn't matter because they could always make up for it. It was just that they were going to have to do a little bit more work instead of me making 17 decisions about late work on one assignment. I'm not going to do that because it's either on time or it's not for me. They were responsible for tracking the grade and keeping all the assignments for the duration of the semester. Because, computers do weird things, as Arlen and I were challenged figuring out, trying to get me so that my microphone was on for 20 minutes before you guys arrived. Sometimes I've had computers drop grades from kids, and if they could bring it out of their folder and show it to me, I would give them credit. Otherwise, if they tossed it before the end of the semester, they would have to do the assignment again. Give them the grading scale, let them know what it is, let them know if there's extra credit, let them know if there's anything that they can do. And I actually had the syllabus as an assignment so that a parent or a guardian had to sign it and it had to be turned in for credit. My assignment sheet looked a little bit like this. It's a little short just because of the screen size. But this is an example that I would put the date assigned on the wall or on the website, or actually I would put it at both. And then the student and the day that it was due, and then the student is responsible for putting their own score in the far right column. And then they can just add up what we've done to this point and divide it by however far we've gotten in class and divide it, and poof, there's their percentage. Very easy, very quick. And because of that, I would not give out anybody's grade. Like if they ask me, hey, Dr. R, what's my grade? I'm not going to answer them because it's an infectious process. And I would always print out a midterm grade sheet for them and 9 weeks grade, and then another midterm, and then the final grade at the end of the semester. So they did get grade reports, and of course they got their assignments back. So they were always being filled in on what their grades were at the time. I did have extra credit in my class. This is a shortened list, but it'll give you the idea. They were either subject related in relation to my class, or they were motivational, inspirational. If it wasn't on the list, this is not the complete list. My list was a solid 2-page covered on both sides paper. But I had books like medical mysteries, because it's appropriate to my class. Hidden Figures would be a great one for math. There's lots of them that you can find for whatever your particular discipline is. Lots of these are true stories, lots of them are fiction, but either, if it's not to your subject, then it's about character and it's about life, which I don't think we have enough time to boost with kids. So this was a good way to do this. So if they turned in a late assignment for me, I would give them a 1. And in my grade book, a 1 meant that their assignment was late, but they turned it in. And then that was their ticket to doing extra credit. And they could do as much extra credit as they wanted. If they had all of their assignments in, they could earn 150%, in my class. It didn't matter to me. But if you notice, I asked them to tell me about their favorite part of the story and why. And the reason is that kids would cheat on extra credit. So I would try and do it so that if it wasn't true to form, like I had a young man turn in a story that was a love story that I didn't think he would choose. It wasn't like Star Wars or something like that. And he fessed up that his girlfriend read the book and wrote the paper. So he didn't get credit for that. And I took away his option for extra credit for the semester. And he agreed that it was fair. So if you can keep the relationships positive, even when you have to punish kids, they're like, yeah, okay, you caught me. But when I found out that it was on Monday, I went to work and all these kids, and must have been November, started turning in papers for Remember the Titans. Well, it was the JV football team, some brave set of parents had the football team over on a Sunday, and they had a pizza popcorn party, and they all watched Remember the Titans. And then I got a stack of papers in my classroom the next day. Perfect. That's very appropriate socialization. They're not drinking beers out behind the garden shed in their yard. They're together, they're watching an inspiring movie, and then they're writing a little paper on it. So it's not, it's not painful. It's an excellent, it's been an excellent way for me to do it for many, many years. So I'll just give you some ideas of what you can do for extra credit. With low achieving classrooms, I used this a few times and it really worked. With low achieving classrooms, I find that kids are a large number of them they're not organized. They have a notebook where there's just all sorts of stuff just porcupining out of it, if you know what I mean, or their book bags. They can't find anything because it's got last semester's snacks in it, along with everything else. In fact, frequently they'll have work and stuff that was in a class last semester that they aren't even in anymore. Pairs of socks and who knows what. So what I did upon occasion when I came across a low achieving class is I would schedule a catch-up day. And I would draw a ketchup bottle, as you can see here on this chalkboard that I actually brought home from the high school. And I would ask kids to, if they were all caught up, bring a book, bring a magazine, bring, Sudoku puzzles or whatever. And if kids were missing work, it was their opportunity to work on that work. And I would identify what their missing work was. And those materials are laid out, either the blanks for that assignment or magazines if they had to make a collage, glue, scissors, all the stuff that they need. Have it available for them. And then as they finish and turn their papers in, they can read, or if you have, and this is a good thing to have, is checkers, chessboards, cards, Uno, different kinds of games like that kids can play because they're still engaging and they're still learning. I can't tell you, because of phones, I can't tell you how many kids I had to teach how to play checkers. And that's surprising to me. Now, chess, if you can teach them chess or teach a couple kids chess, and then those kids teach a couple others, that actually teaches thinking. So that's an excellent activity to do. I used to do an in-school duty for 1 hour, and they had to be silent. They had to do their work. They couldn't interact with one another at all. But frequently kids would have all their work done. And one at a time, I would ask them, do you want to learn how to play chess? And I must have taught thousands of kids to play chess. And then I would let them know that there were also really nice chessboards in the library and that they can play chess on their lunch hour with one another if they wanted to. But it really works. And so if you have a class that just isn't getting it done, try and have a catch-up day. And yes, I drew that. And no, it's not any good, but it's really okay to show kids that, just do something even if you can't do it well. It's really okay. They get the idea and they love puns. I don't care what level kids, they love puns. They love puns, they love jokes, and that can kind of boost them because they kind of know where you're coming from. Now, if you have an individual that is challenging, if they're on um, parole or something similar, working with juvenile detention, somebody, I don't even remember who it was, it might have been a counselor, suggested this to me, is documentation. Have a notebook, make sure to keep it locked up, because otherwise that student could make sure it's missing for you. Take the student aside. I frequently would take kids out into the hall during a video or where they're working on stations or, doing book work or whatever. And I would call them out in the hall and I would quietly tell them that I will be documenting their activity and their behavior every day. And I will be writing down a detailed description along with dating it. And by dating it and by telling the student, you make it clear that this can hold up in a court of law, which is true. I had a young man who was, really, to be quite very honest with you, he was very violent. And I happened to have him at that time in a PE class, and I couldn't go into the locker room to supervise his behavior, but I had heard that he had taken off a canvas belt with a metal buckle, and he had wielded it like a whip and hit another kid on the bare back with it, and it broke the skin. Now, this was relayed to me by somebody else, but I did have 2 or 3 kids who agreed when I talked to them one-on-one that it had happened. And so that's when I started documenting this kid's behavior. And then I had him in the classroom as well. And when I took him aside and told him, I did not know if he was involved in juvie. I did not know if he was on parole or probation or any, whatever. But I told him that I was going to do this. I watched his eyes get wide. And after that, he never misbehaved. I think I had maybe 2 incidences that I documented on a notebook. But if you have a kid that has run into the law, this can potentially really get them to pay attention and to bring it down a couple notches. I wished I would have had this technique when I had that negative leader, that I had to kind of like take the pins out underneath him by writing his friends positive postcards and sneaking them to them after class. But it worked, and he just became ineffective. But this will hold up, and if you find out that somebody has a probation officer, talk to them, get their number and say, what should I look for? What can I utilize? What can I do? And I would not be surprised if this was part of it. So make sure it's locked up in your desk, or that you carry it with you, that notebook, so that it doesn't like wander away on you. For kids that are challenging, please have a schedule. Put it on the chalkboard, whatever you need to do. This was a poster that I got years ago, and then I had it laminated. Teachers' best friends, lamination. So I would write on the schedule exactly what we were doing for that particular hour. And sometimes I'm not doing the same thing for all my classes. So I might have, like, you see, Tuesday notes, chapters 7 and 8. If I was doing something else with another class, I might have like 1, 2, and 3 hours doing chapter 7 and 8. And then I put a slash, hours 5 and 6 doing stations. They probably have an idea of what you're working on. But I would write this, I would write the schedule up with a Crayola marker, and then at the end of the week, I could wipe it all off and then start again. So I have found that kids that are traumatized, they were in situations of domestic violence, or they were sexually assaulted, or they were beaten, or homeless. They're traumatized. And I would have students who would come in on Monday and look at the schedule and write it down word for word on their planner, because they want to know what's going on and what's happening every day. I remember I had one young woman who, she struggled, nice kid, but she struggled. And I only had Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday planned. And she said, "What's going on Thursday and Friday?" And I said, "Well, I have calls out to guest speakers, but they haven't called me back, so I can't actually put them on the schedule. But I think at least one of those days is going to be a guest speaker. But as soon as I find out, I'll get it on the board." She was like, "Well, all right." So, so it really mattered to her. I was surprised, I mean, kids would just usually take a cursory look at it and yeah, like, oh yeah, whatever, we were doing. But some of them really want to know what's going on. And so I was able to get it filled out by like the end of Tuesday. But she she was one kid, and I knew she was a traumatized kid. And what I've learned about traumatized individuals is that can be a characteristic. And if you see my example schedule, I have a guest speaker on Monday, and on Tuesday they're doing notes from chapter 7 and 8. And I had to fib on these, I confess, because I never ever taught from a book, so I never used chapters 7 and 8. Wednesday was a video, Thursday was library, and Friday was research in the classroom. But that would just give you an idea. And the fact that you can laminate it, it just makes it easier for you so that you can reschedule it. Or you can, if you actually use a real chalkboard anymore, I know they're still out there, I don't know, or whiteboard, you could put that up on something like that. If you can, as often as possible, get students out of their seats. I mean, if you think about it, they wear those seats almost 8 hours out of the day. And when they're stressed, they need to get outside or they need to play in water. I have heard that, and I think it's true. When you can like help them reset their brains, they're much more ready to learn once they've kind of, uh, um, the old saying is gotten that stink blowed off of them. That's a old comment from one of my elderly ancestors. But I think it's true. So if you can get them out for a walk when it's nice. Now, at my particular district, our district land was actually very big. We had a stadium, we had football fields, we had the building, and right across the street was a river. So if it was a nice day, nice fall day, a nice spring day, those spring days when kids have been shut up all winter, they're just crazy. And the first nice day, I was always able to take my kids on a walk, which I think is very good for mental health, without permission slips. Check with your district and make sure you know what you need to do in your particular district. I did not have to get permission slips for those walks. And if you need a permission slip, or if there's other places you can take them, for example, about 2 blocks away from our high school was a city park. About 4 blocks from our high school was a natural planted prairie. There was also the river. And so if you can utilize that, or if you have something similar, get those permission slips signed as part of the documents at the beginning of the semester, the beginning of the year. Get them signed and have those in your back pocket. We also recently, the high school right across the street from the high school, the old elementary school was demolished, and now they have a large patch of grass there, which is actually outdoor classrooms. So if you have any outdoor classrooms, please make use of them any way that you can. And it might be for a simple game to get the jitters out of their bodies. You can look up new games it's kind of an old concept, but new games is something that's not competitive, but you could do it with a lot of different kids with very minimal equipment, if any. And depending on your area, you can do science experiments out there. You can gather information for treating with math. You can do all sorts of stuff. So get those permission slips ahead of time and be ready for when they need a break and when the weather is nice. And these are some examples. I did work with an English teacher who actually received an educational award because she really liked nature, and she got permission slips and took the kids across the street to the river, and they could spread out wherever they wanted, and they spent the hour writing about the river in their notebooks. And it would calm them down, it would make them happy, it would make them peaceful. And some kids said, I'm surprised at how beautiful it is down there. There happened to be like a boat landing and a dock and park property in that area. And it really wasn't used by anybody. So they had the place to themselves. Science classes would go gather and test the water of the river. A coworker that taught math took the kids out onto the football field and had them fly kites and then map the trajectory. So they went on an information quest where they were able to fly kites for a while and then take some notes and then go back and put it on graph paper. Another coworker with permission slip took her science class to a nearby prairie within walking distance. I also know the horticulture teacher would take the kids out and they would collect different types of plants. And yes, they would find ditchweed. And then they would come back and they would analyze those and look at them under a microscope and classify them and do all that kinds of things. For our physical education classes, the canoeing classes would walk 2 blocks to the local swimming pool early on in the semester or late in the spring and practice paddling strokes sitting on the edge of the with their paddle in the water. And then other days they would actually work with canoes in the water and practice strokes and tipping and then emptying canoes and things like that. So all sorts of these things you can, there's just so many things that you can do. If you have businesses nearby, you could give students math homework and things like that, and they have to find certain things with a certain price and figure out, the price per ounce or something like that. Just different ideas. Just sit for a while and brainstorm, and you'll be able to come up with some things. This is another reset for those dark winter days and when kids are unmanageable. Find a few good books to pull from, and that like I used to have little post-it notes sticking out of them if I needed a story on honesty, or if I needed a story on kindness, or if I needed a story on fair play. I would have them marked just so I knew which ones I wanted to read at that particular time. Kids of any age, they'll appreciate the story and they'll soak it in, and it allows their brains to picture it. It's relaxing, and it actually kind of naturally causes a reset of the brain. If you haven't heard of Brain Gym, if you haven't heard of Donna Eden and energy medicine, you might look into those. They're very valuable trainings. They both have books related to them, and they can help kids do better with computation. It can help kids with reading. It can help them with test taking. EFT is another thing that can help them with both of those, but they're different types of body work that actually help the brain. And that would be another option for you. Also, I've done classes on those topics with Arlen. So if you want to look those up, I think he has those available also. Different books that I've used. Now, some of these are really old, but I never really found anything to replace them. Robert Fulghum books. He's the man who wrote the poem, Everything I Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. And he's very, very funny. And when I taught middle school, and kudos to those of you who teach middle school, because I think the very best teachers have the capacity to teach middle school because they will devour anybody else who can't handle it. Um, I was teaching middle school and I read a Robert Fulghum story from one of his books, and a very challenging kid went home and said, Mom, we got to go to the store. We got to buy these books. And because he was just guffawing in class. And his mom's like, you what? She said, he's never ever wanted a book because I guess it was, I don't know if it was Welcome Back to School or it was conferences. She made a point to come and tell me that she dropped everything that she was doing to go to the store and try and find a Robert Fulghum book because her kid had never wanted a book before. And so she took the opportunity to do that. Chicken Soup for the Soul, those are always good. Richard Peck books, he wrote historical fiction, and they're funny, they're inspiring, or they're a story with a twist. Kids love a story with a twist. Kind of like they like puns and they like jokes. So look for something that would work like that, and it can kind of add a nice exclamation point to your day, especially when it comes, because I don't think we spend enough time on character. We teach kids math and how to read and how to write and how to do all these things. But sometimes, you have to ask, what are you after? Why do we need third graders to be learning calculus? What are they going to do with it? I had an uncle who was very gifted in math, but what he used it for was he ripped people off with it. And he would go into casinos. He was a card counter. He would go into casinos and he would rip off casinos. So, what are they going to do with it? How is it going to benefit the whole, the greater good? So that's where a lot of these stories can kind of fit in. And one time, one student asked me, at the time I did not have my doctorate. So they said, Miss Reynolds, what's your philosophy of life? And I pulled out a Robert Fulghum book and I read them a story about how some countries recovered from World War II and how about it was about shining light into dark places. And that satisfied them. So, it can answer difficult questions like that. If kids have a chaotic brain, this is a good technique to teach kids in general. When they sit down for those standardized tests, and some of them just like freak, or they've been taking it for 3 hours and it's like their brains wrung out on the paper and they're just exhausted, or they sit down and they know it's an important test, or they want to get a good grade and they panic. If you teach them to just tap their hands, right, left, or they can tap their hands on their knees, or they can tap their feet on the floor. It doesn't have to be obvious. Nobody, people are doing that all the time, but if you do it right and left, the brain signals across the brain, it will kind of break that deer in the headlights feeling, and it will reduce that panic so that they can kind of calm themselves and allow the brain to do a mini reset. And then they'll be more ready for that task at hand. They can just do it when the person is passing out the papers, just back and forth. It doesn't have to be obvious. It doesn't have to be loud. It just needs to retrack. It just needs to kind of like break that interference. I'm sorry, this is kind of fuzzy, but if you can, at any opportunity, celebrate things. I had a very famous habit of starting a countdown at the end of the school year, and I started at 60 days. Yeah, I know it's kind of early, but it was always March, and I was always kind of like looking forward to spring break, and kids would get itchy and they get owly, and so all of a sudden I would always have it counted backwards on my calendar, and then all of a sudden a 60 would appear on my chalkboard or on the wall. And they're like, what's that number about? And that was the number of days that were left in the school year. So then starting at 25 days left, I would write a picture that would symbolize the number of days left. So frequently on day 25, it would be a quarter. And they would have to either figure it out, or it would be a pun, or it would be, in math, you could do a formula. um, and sometimes it was just a play on words. Um, but they had to figure them out. So this is a copy of one. I had to borrow a student's license, driver's license, because the kids' licenses are different than people that are over 21. So this is a remake of an Illinois uh, uh, license plate, and as you can see, the kid has like really wild bad hair. And I taught at Hananiga, so of course they're wearing an H sweatshirt. But if you take a close look at their name is Summer Day, and they live on Vacation Drive in Kickback, Illinois. I mean, it's just totally corny. And it has the other second little picture of them in the bottom corner, and they kind of have the rivers running through the license plate. And this one symbolized 16 days left of school because it was a kid's driver's license. So just play with it. And I know I have a previous student who's a teacher in Indiana who does the same thing. So, and if you really don't like to draw, you can just do like scribbles, they can just be psychedelic. They could just be bubble numbers, it doesn't matter, but kids kind of like to know. Let's see, I think I have another one here. Yeah, that's 2 days left where I had the peace sign. And it's good to model something that sometimes you're not necessarily good at. Sometimes I would do 9-inch nails for 9. 8 was one of my favorite because I would put a plate of food with eaten food with a fork over the edge of the plate and a crumpled up napkin and almost no milk left in the glass, and kids are looking at it and they're like, plate. And then another kid might be like, yesterday was 9, today is 8. They ate the food. And so you can kind of set this up because you can see who are the concrete thinkers and who are the ones who are like, oh, I like this one. You can do birthday cakes with candles. Lord knows I've tried to do just about anything. But students, I would even have students come in the classroom who had been in my class the year before and said, hey, what is it today? A year later. So if you can celebrate anything in any way, it can increase the quality of the environment for kids. These are some other additional things to engage kids. These are some simple extra credit activities that kids could get engaged in. And I would give like one of these out every 9 weeks, a different one. I have a family fitness sheet, I have a family game sheet, and a community volunteer sheet. Now, in some cases, edit these, change them any way you like. Maybe students have a difficult family, and so maybe they could go play a game with a neighbor, or their friend and their friend's parents. So, orchestrate it any way you want. I was kind of going with the family fitness sheet in trying to get families to do more things together. So they'd have to fill out their first name, last name, and hour, and this is only worth 5 points. And I would just add it on to their grade as long as they didn't have any missing work. So they have to, and I said, and with everything in life comes paperwork. So yeah, just live with it. You have to fill it out. You got to turn it in. So what's the activity you chose to participate in? And they would write out, who did you exercise with? Your brother, your mom, your dad. What was the date and time? And how long did they spend? Have you done this before? Will you do it again? Did you have fun? And the family game sheet looked a little bit like this. And I did get reports back from families that some of them were starting game night on Thursday nights because they had so much fun. And it was a great way for them to spend some time together. And they picked the night when everybody would be home. And again, they have to fill it out, first name, last name, hour. What game did you play? Who played the game with you? I wanted a list of names and the time it started, the time it finished. Did you have snacks? What kinds? Did you have fun? Now, I did have one young woman turn it in, and I looked at it and I said, you stopped your mom in the middle of making dinner for you and you made her play a game of tic-tac-toe with you. Is that right? And her eyes got like saucers and she said, how did you know? And a number of kids in class started laughing. And I said, look, the idea was not for you to interrupt your mother while she's making you a meal, because they played tic-tac-toe and they played it for 3 minutes. So I knew exactly, and it was like 5:10, PM. So I just took a stab, and I was completely right that she stopped her mom cooking, made her play a tic-tac-toe game with her, and then so she finished it. And I said, I'm not going to accept this. You can have another one, but the idea is for everyone to have fun. It's not just an assignment and for you to interrupt your mom while she's doing something for you anyway. So there are times when I would not accept them when they were turned in. Or I wouldn't accept them because they didn't put their name on it, or they missed their hour or something like that. If they're going to get credit for playing a game or going for a jog in class, then they have to do it right. And this one was an extra credit volunteering sheet, and it could be in-house in your school if they were helping another teacher with something and you deemed it as valid. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But again, I want them to answer questions. What type of volunteering did you do? How much volunteering did you do? Was it an activity for your church, community center, a neighbor, an aunt? Did anybody volunteer with you? Will you do this particular activity again? Just those kinds of things. Someplace in your room, it's a good idea to have this. Have some healthy snacks, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, jelly. Nobody's at their best when their first thought is hunger. If kids need a lunch, our lunchroom did this, so we didn't have to. They would give a kid a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and milk for lunch if they didn't have any money on their account or they didn't have a lunch. It's also possible to get donated apples, oranges, or packaged snacks from lunchrooms for your classroom. But our school tried to take care of this anytime that they could. And if that's not the case, maybe have that in your classroom for kids who really need it. Because there are people that are food insecure. And again, of course, with peanut butter, watch out for the allergies and things like that. But middle school, high school kids should have an awareness of that. And if your kids are in your classroom, you're going to know those things. But I've had kids so lightheaded that they were on the verge of passing out. And they asked myself and my coworker if we had crackers because she didn't have anything for lunch. And she goes, I always have lunch. I just forgot my card, and we said, ask them. They'll give you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and milk if you really need it. So keep that in mind, because there are kids that are out there that are hurting and they need the sustenance. Feel free to modify any information to fit your particular classroom, your particular administration, your subject, and most importantly, of course, your students. And I hope you have a great year, and I hope some of this was useful. And if you need more information, go back to Classroom Management 1 and check it out on YouTube. And thanks.
All right, Dr. Reynolds, thank you so much for sharing all these amazing strategies, all these activities for student engagement and classroom management. This has been terrific. We've got a few minutes left before 4 o'clock, so feel free to put your thanks to Dr. Reynolds in the chat. And then, of course, if you've got any questions, now is the time to ask those in the chat. We'll kind of monitor that and see if anybody has any questions popping up. Lots of great information, lots of thank yous coming in, Dr. Reynolds. Great ideas provided. Fantastic ideas, great information. Yes, if you've got any questions, we've got a little bit of time here.
Yeah, well, last time I went so far over on you, I felt bad. Nobody could ask any questions. So I tried to make sure I finished a little early.
Yep, no problem. This was, yeah, perfect. Perfect timing. Yeah, that's a great comment. These are the sorts of things that educators collect over the course of a career. So thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for sharing them.
Well, as I've explained to you, Arlen, I miss teaching. So I thank you for this opportunity. And
How about
I hope,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yes. Oh, I just hope to help some people because I was in a dark space when I almost left.
Yeah.
And I I had a great career. I loved what I did for a living, and I appreciate this opportunity. I will be doing some institutes in the future, so if anybody wants any information, just visit my website. You'll see what I'm about, and contact me through my Gmail account.
Here's a
Thank you.
good question from Patricia. How to convince admin when you're not allowed food in the classroom? Going back to your having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches idea.
You know what? I'd give it to the kid in the hall. I'm just an idea. Or walk them to the lunchroom with it. Let it be known that you have it if kids need it. And that, it's really hard walking around the obstacles that can be administration. So I understand. And this is something that I'm just going to throw out there. I started to throw my hat in the ring because I taught health. And so I taught sex ed. So I had people coming after me trying to get me fired, very conservative people, for 30 years. So I started to throw my hat in the ring for just basic teacher awards, you know what I mean? And I received a number of awards. The first time I received any recognition at all, and I put it on my syllabus, everything went quiet. Parents questioned me less. Administration let me do more. And the more PR that I got the school, the more freedom I won. And honestly, I was able to do almost whatever I wanted towards the end of my career. Not that I was doing anything nefarious. It's just that because of my accolades, I was recognized as a good teacher. And so anytime, they didn't give me any money to spend. I couldn't even get markers. But if I wanted to do something, I was able to do it. I taught from my own knowledge and my own training. I never, ever, 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 ever used a textbook because I consider them pieces of firewood. No offense, but obviously I use some books because of the things that I would read to kids. But it's just that I had so much different types of training with first aid and just different things in the health careers that I just felt that textbooks are really lacking. Somebody asked me, Carrie Ward, I think. My doctorate is in teacher leadership. And I got it because I planned on writing a book, and then the doctorate took so much out of me, I haven't done it yet. But it's sitting there on the shelf. So.
And Patricia, just to follow up on your question, I'll be sending out an evaluation survey tomorrow when I send the recording link. So you'll be able to give your thoughts and feedback on today's webinar through that survey. And then, Dr. Reynolds, did you see Tommy's comment there in the chat?
I don't think so.
He just said that most of last year I'd come in early to eat breakfast with a student in my special education class because she had so much anxiety about eating alone, and she would get so hangry that she couldn't focus during ELA class in the morning. made a world of difference and was a chance
Yep.
to encourage socializing with a few other students that would join our table.
Yes, and some stress techniques would be great for a kid like that. The other thing I was going to say is the administration for many, many years frowned on parties in the classroom, and I made them part of my curriculum. And I had a drug-free party where we made smoothies, and then kids brought a snack each, like a bag of Cheetos or a bag of Doritos or a bottle of pop or whatever, and then I would make smoothies because it was part of a lesson. It was part of my curriculum, and um, and I would also use it as a reward at the end of the first 9 weeks for their good behavior for those 9 weeks, and the administration would again get out of my way for that. And then at the end of the semester, I had a healthy snack party where we would have the diet pop, orange juice, um, um, low fat potato chips, just things like that, so that kids would like recognize labels and see things like that. So and the administration got out of my way for that also. So start throwing your hat in the ring so that you get some accolades behind your name, just for leverage. Honestly, I just think it certainly worked for me. So just an idea.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for all the great questions and comments here at the end. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.